Let's go to our other main story this morning and hear more now from the Catholic Archbishop of Melbourne, Dennis Hart, in the wake of that scathing Victorian inquiry into child sex abuse. Archbishop Hart spoke to Lateline last night.
We welcome the report and we are committed to facing the terrible truth that victims have suffered beyond all proportion. I have always tried to act in accordance with the teachings of the Church, and I believe that my record as Archbishop stands by that.
Even when you told a woman who'd been sexually abused by a priest, and I'm quoting the court record here, "Go to hell, bitch"?
That was an unfortunate comment, one which I've regretted long since, and I do apologise.
Now, the move to clarify the legal position of the Church will mean that you'll be held legally responsible for the actions of your priests. Victims have long argued for this kind of accountability. Do you understand the need for this change so families have an obvious structure that they can go to for legal redress?
We endorse the recommendations, and we're grateful for the recommendations because this represents a new stage and a new moment of moving forward.
That response last night on Lateline, and the Premier of Victoria, Dennis Napthine, himself a Catholic, was scathing about the role of the Catholic Church when he handed down this report yesterday. To tell us more about the recommendations, we are joined by Georgie Crozier, the chairwoman of the inquiry, and Nationals MP David O'Brien, who was also on the committee. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
A highly charged and emotional day again yesterday for so many people. Let's go through firstly, though, the recommendations.
Beverly, there are 5 key areas that we've recommended to government. The first one is to reform criminal law. The second area is to have easier access to litigation. The third area is to have an alternative avenue for justice for victims. The fourth area is greater monitoring and scrutiny, and the fifth area is improved prevention measures for all organisations.
And in particular, this notion around grooming, which we heard repeatedly during this hearing, the hearing of how these young people were groomed by these predators.
Yeah, this is a significant reform, we think, and we want to, currently as it stands, there's grooming in relation to technology-based grooming, and we really feel that grooming should be extended to this level of criminal child abuse, so that anybody that we're asking the legislation be included for secondary victims as well as those that are affecting the child.
And David, on that recommendation that would make concealment of abusing children a crime, how confident are you that organisations, in particular the Catholic Church, will follow up on that?
Well, it'll be the law, so they'll have to, and that's the big thing that has been lacking, in the sense that the community has placed trust in the Church's assurance in the past, and regretfully that trust has been betrayed. And that's why we've called the report Betrayal of Trust. But with the law making concealment an offence, and it previously has been one arguably, but that will absolutely confirm the government and the community's resolve to stamp out systemic child abuse.
How hard was it for you to go through all of this testimony, these first-hand accounts, the shattered families, the suicides? You, David, read off a laundry list of country towns in Victoria completely devastated by these obscene, disgraceful acts. As a politician, as a man, as a family man, how difficult was it?
Well, it was difficult for me, obviously, but I think much more difficult for the victims who came before us. And it was their stories that we as MPs, elected MPs I suppose, but in a bipartisan way had to carry forward and consider in our inquiry's work. And we hope we've given life to those plaintive cries that had been ignored for many years. And those are very damaged lives, and we hope that there is some hope for them to recover as best they can. But it was their voices that we were giving effect to.
And Georgie, was it difficult for you?
Yes, it was difficult for all of us, but as David said, it was much more difficult for those victims that came before us at each hearing. They were really courageous, and some of them had never disclosed their abuse before. So for those people, it was just a really huge step for them. So we were really grateful that they did have the courage to come forward like they did.
I'm interested in your thoughts about the healing process now and really whether this becomes the beginning of it, or we've seen the response from Dennis Hart there. How much accountability do you think the Catholic Church and many of these other organisations are going to take, and particularly with regard to compensation? There have been some small payouts made, but does this really start to help the healing?
In our report, it really highlights what we've heard, and I think for many people, once they read this report, we're hoping that it will at least go some way for them to finally hear that somebody has actually understood what they've been talking about for so long. So there is a lot of stories in the report that really just describes what's gone on. So at some point, I think organisations that have any involvement with children should read our report.
And in terms of compensation, David, as we know, lots of people have been compensated by the Catholic Church. They would argue receiving paltry amounts compared to the severity of the abuse perpetrated upon them. One option is to make organisations like the Catholic Church legal entities, which would make them much more prone to legal actions. Is that something you're keen to see followed through?
That's specifically one of our recommendations.
Are you worried there's going to be a lot of wriggle room now attempted by the Catholic Church to not, despite Archbishop Hart saying, yes, we endorse all these recommendations, but shy away from that one, which could potentially cost the Church millions and millions of dollars?
We hope that there has been wriggle room in the past, if to use your term, and we hope that that behaviour has stopped. And when you say the Catholic Church, I think it's important, I tried to in my speech make a distinction between the hierarchy and the wider church. And I was a Catholic, raised a Catholic as well, and the church is in a sense all the people in the church, and it actually is up to the broader Catholic community to regain control of the decisions made within the church, as far as I can say. And I say that as a personal matter. The report is very focused on what the government should do, and I think the Catholic Church will change, but that is a matter for the church, and hopefully what Archbishop Hart was saying last night was in a genuine concessory tone and not a concessory tone with qualifications.
Yeah.
Particularly given that that sort of sacrosanct of going into the confessional, he is saying is absolutely not going to be touched. Just very briefly, are you going to be working with the federal government going forward?
We are hoping that the Royal Commission will look at our report very closely. We think it could be a blueprint for other states, and we're just hoping that they will look at our report very closely.
Good.
And work together.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Well, there are